After that morning with the snake, Thomas and I formed an unspoken understanding. I would visit him occasionally on the outskirts of the village, pretending it was only to keep an eye on him. He was still not trusted in OWA, and none of the elders would permit him inside. Even Mama Eben, with all her wisdom and calm, had warned me, "Keep your eyes open, Obreva. Not all strangers who smile have friendly hearts." But when I met with Thomas, he didn't try to push his ideas or promises on me. Instead, he would just talk, telling me stories of his own village, far across the water, in a land where the trees didn't stretch tall like our Iroquois and where the sky was often hidden by mist. He spoke of animals I had never seen, of inventions that sounded like stories from our ancestors' tales. Sometimes, I almost forgot he was a stranger. One day, he looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen before, a strange spark in his eyes. "Obleva," he began, his voice gentle, "would you like to learn how to write?" The words hung in the air, strange and heavy. I knew of writing. I had seen the marks he made in his book, the strange curves and straight lines that seemed to speak a language of their own. But writing was not of our world, not of the spirits and stories that shaped us. My chest tightened at the thought, and a flicker of suspicion burned in my gut. "Right," I repeated, the word unfamiliar on my tongue. "Yes," Thomas said, his face warm with an eagerness that made me uncomfortable. "Imagine taking your thoughts, your voice, and putting them on paper. Then anyone who reads it can hear you, even if you are not there. It's like having a part of yourself, spread across time." I frowned, shifting uneasily. Something about it felt wrong, like he was offering me a piece of his world that I didn't belong to. The thought of capturing my thoughts, letting them leave my mind and settle on a page, felt strange. I glanced away, not wanting him to see the doubt creeping into my heart. "Why do you want to teach me?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. The stories I had heard, of others coming to change us, to make us forget who we were, crowded my mind. I didn't know if I could trust him with something like this. He sighed, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I just thought you might like it," he said, his voice soft, as if he could sense my fear. "It's a skill, one that connects people." I took a step back, my heartbeat quickening. Suddenly, the distance between us felt like a barrier, reminding me that he was still an outsider, still someone who might lead me down a path I didn't want to follow. "I don't need it," I said firmly, the word coming out harder than I'd meant them to. "I don't need to write anything to have people hear me." I turned before he could say more, the questions burning in my mind too heavy to bear. As I hurried back toward the village, I felt the weight of his offer pressing down on me. I didn't want his writing, his strange symbols that felt so foreign. But part of me couldn't shake the curiosity, the whisper that maybe there was something more to his offer. But no, I couldn't let myself trust that easily. When I reached the village, I went straight to Adesova. She was fetching water at the well, her laughter ringing out with the other girls. As soon as she saw my face, her laughter faded, and she tilted her head, her expression serious. "What happened?" she asked, her voice low, sensing something was wrong. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "Thomas," he asked if I wanted to learn how to write. Her eyes widened, a flicker of fear mingling with disbelief. "Write? Like those marks the white people make?" I nodded, feeling my cheeks flush as I repeated the words. "Yes," he said, "it would make my voice last even when I'm not there. But I don't know, Adesova. I don't trust it." Adesova's face hardened, her fingers tightening on the rope of the water bucket. "What if it's a trick? To make us forget our words, our stories? They always come saying they want to help, but then they leave us with nothing." I felt a surge of anger at her words, the memory of all that had happened to our village, the raids, the separations, flooding my mind. She was right. I couldn't let Thomas lead me down a path that might take something from us. Something that belonged to OWA alone. But beneath that anger, a small, unwelcome part of me whispered questions. What if he truly did mean no harm? What if there was a way to learn without losing ourselves? It felt dangerous. This curiosity, this whisper that maybe, just maybe, there was more to his offer than I wanted to admit. I shook my head, pushing the thought away. For now, I would trust my instincts. I would trust Adesuva's words and the strength of our village. And as I walked away from the well, I decided that I would keep my distance from Thomas, for my own sake and for OWA's. After a few days of silence, I thought maybe Thomas had given up. I kept my distance, keeping to my usual tasks with Adesuva, fetching water, gathering firewood, and sometimes slipping away to join the other children in games of *koto* and hide and seek. But a part of me felt Thomas' absence as a strange emptiness, a small itch in the back of my mind that refused to settle. One afternoon, as I was returning from the stream alone, carrying a pot of water on my head, I heard a voice calling my name from the edge of the path. Obleva! I stopped, glancing around, wary. Thomas stood by the tree line, his hands held out as though he was summoning a bird. I stiffened, a flare of annoyance rising in me. What did he want now? Obleva, he repeated gently. I thought maybe I could show you something different. I didn't move, letting the pot rest on my hip as I watched him, guarded. He raised a small, colorful book, its cover bright with pictures. If you don't want to write, he said softly, maybe you would like to learn how to read. I eyed the book suspiciously. I had seen books before, bound collections of strange white pages that seemed so distant, so different from the woven palm leaf scrawls the elders used for record-keeping. But this book was vibrant, the colors calling to me with an unexpected warmth. It felt different from his other offerings, not like a demand, but an invitation. What's in it? I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. My heart raced a little as I took a cautious step forward. Stories, Thomas replied, his voice gentle, as though he were speaking to a nervous animal. Stories for children, like you. He held out the book, and I felt myself moving closer, almost against my will. The cover was painted in bright shades of green and blue, with the image of a lion and a small bird, their expressions curious and friendly. I reached out and brushed my fingers against the cover, the smoothness cool under my fingertips. These stories, Thomas said, his voice soft. They come from faraway places, lands with creatures and adventures. But you don't need to write to understand them. Reading is about seeing, about hearing other voices, other lives, and letting them dance in your mind. I bit my lip, wrestling with the pull I felt. Part of me wanted to snatch the book and run, to find a quiet place and bury myself in those pages. But I could still hear Adesuva's warning, the caution in Mama Eben's eyes. What if I don't want to learn your ways? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Thomas didn't flinch, only smiled gently. This is not about changing who you are, Obleva, he replied. It's about seeing more of the world. The more you see, the stronger you become. Reading isn't meant to make you forget your village. It can help you understand it in a new way. My eyes drifted to the cover again, the lion's golden mane and the tiny bird perched on its shoulder. Something about it felt safe, like a story passed down from an elder at the evening fire, familiar and strange at once. Will you show me? I asked finally, my voice barely louder than a breath. Thomas nodded, flipping open the cover with careful fingers. He pointed to the first page, filled with bright, bold drawings and words that seemed to jump off the page. His finger traced the shapes, and he sounded out each word, his voice slow and warm, the sounds unfamiliar but almost musical. Once upon a time, he began, his voice soft yet steady. There was a lion who wanted to fly. I stared at the page, the lines of text blending into the image of the lion staring up at a blue sky filled with stars. I could almost feel the lion's yearning, his eyes fixed on a world he could not reach. As I listened, something inside me stirred, a strange, unexpected feeling, as if a door had opened. I wanted to know more, to let the words flow into me, to understand what was hidden in those lines. Thomas continued reading, his voice painting images in my mind, each sentence like a stone in a path leading somewhere unknown but beautiful. When he finished the first story, he closed the book and looked at me, his expression warm and hopeful. I stared down at the book, my mind racing. "Why do you want to teach me this?" I asked again, my voice soft. "What does it give you?" Thomas looked away for a moment, a shadow crossing his face. "Because," he said slowly, "there were stories I missed growing up. Stories from other places, other people. I only had one view of the world, and it was a narrow one. I don't want that for you, Obleva. I want you to see as much of the world as possible, in your way." I nodded, uncertain but intrigued. I glanced back toward the village, a pang of worry tugging at my heart. I knew what Adesava and the others might say, the fears they might have. But I also knew that something inside me had changed, a spark ignited by those simple words on a page. "Come back tomorrow," Thomas said, his voice gentle. "We can read more. You don't have to decide now, but if you are ready, I'll be here." I nodded slowly, still unsure, but something about his offer felt like a gift I didn't want to ignore. I took a last look at the book, the lion's face almost inviting me to return, then turned and hurried back to the village, my mind alive with strange, bright images that felt like tiny seeds planted deep within. When I found Adesava, I was too quiet, too filled with the colors and shapes that lingered in my mind. She looked at me with questioning eyes, sensing something different, but I only gave her a small smile, unwilling to share what I didn't fully understand myself. That night, as I lay under the stars, I closed my eyes and let the lion's story replay in my mind, filling the spaces between my cots with new worlds, distant dreams, and questions I couldn't yet answer. The next few days, I slipped out to meet Thomas each afternoon, taking a winding path through the fields so no one could easily track me. He greeted me each time with the same warm smile, the colorful book open and ready. We spent hours going over the strange shapes and symbols, his patient voice guiding me through the sounds, the stories coming alive in my mind like music. But I knew Adesava's suspicions were growing. She had asked me why I was so quiet, why I wandered off alone so often. Each time, I brushed her questions aside, hoping my nervous smile would be enough to ease her worries. She was my closest friend, the one who understood me best. But somehow, this felt like a secret I had to keep, not only for myself but for the quiet spark I felt every time I traced the words with my fingers, unlocking a world beyond OWA's borders. One day, as Thomas and I sat in our spot by the tall grass, I heard a faint rustle behind us. I froze, the words on the page blurring as I looked over my shoulder. Thomas noticed my sudden stillness and followed my gaze. In the shadow stood Adesava, her expression dark, her eyes narrowed with anger I had never seen before. "Oh brava," she called, her voice trembling. "What is this? You've been sneaking off to learn this." Her gaze shifted to Thomas, her eyes cold as they took in the book in his hands, her stance rigid with anger and something deeper, hurt. "Adesava," I began, my voice faltering. "It's not what you think. I just wanted to see what it was like." "To see what?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "To see how he plans to make you forget who you are? To take pieces of us and turn them into his stories." She looked at me, betrayal written in her eyes, and I felt as if a stone had lodged in my chest. Thomas tried to speak, his tone gentle. Adesiva, I promise you, I don't mean harm. I only wanted to share something. No. Adesiva cut him off, her voice fierce. We don't need your stories. We have our own. We don't need your strange marks on paper. We have words in the wind, words that live in the drumbeats and the fireside chants. Her words struck me like a wave, washing away the excitement I'd felt just moments before. My heart ached, torn between the loyalty I felt to Adesiva, to OWA, and the strange pull of the words on those pages. Adesiva, it's not about forgetting, I tried to explain, my voice desperate. It's something different. It doesn't take away from what we have. But she shook her head, the pain in her eyes deepening. Then why hide it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. If it's so harmless, why couldn't you tell me? I had no answer, only the raw truth that I hadn't wanted to lose her trust, her understanding. But here we were, the divide between us widening with each word. She turned to Thomas, her face filled with a fierce, protective anger. You come here and pretend you are our friend. You bring your books and your words, and you think that's enough to make us forget. Her voice trembled, but her gaze remained steady. We've lost too much already. I won't let you take Oblivi too. With that, she turned on her heel, her footsteps heavy as she disappeared back toward the village. I called after her, my voice hoarse, but she didn't turn back. The air felt thick with the weight of her anger, her disappointment. Thomas placed a hand on my shoulder, his expression somber. Maybe she needs time, Obliva, he said gently. Maybe, in her own way, she's just trying to protect you. But his words couldn't erase the hurt I felt, the ache of knowing that in my search for something new, I had wounded someone I cared for deeply.